Hello, I'm taking on a challenge to beat every playable Nintendo published game. Welcome to the next episode. The next games are Urban Champion and Versus Urban Champion. Urban Champion was an NES title developed by Nintendo R&D 1 and released in Japan in November of 1984. The game seems to be based on Game & Watch Punch-Out, with some of the core gameplay elements being near identical. Unfortunately, I personally thought that Game & Watch game was one of Nintendo's worst games I've played so far, and in the eyes of the general public, it doesn't look like this one was all that well received either. Nowadays, it is often regarded as one of Nintendo's worst first-party titles on the NES. Around the same time, Nintendo also released Versus Urban Champion in the arcades, similar to many of their other NES games at the time. This machine is apparently very rare. It's hard to even find any historical references to this machine, as I can't find any flyers that advertised the game. One of the only pieces of media I found that recognizes this game's existence is a brief section in a Japanese trade magazine. Additionally, in 2015, footage of the game was uploaded to a Japanese video site called Nico Nico Doga. This looks like video capture from the actual machine, so it seems to have existed somewhere. That might have been all there was to this game, as there was no way to play this one even on an emulator for quite a long time. However, in 2018, Hamster published an official digital release of the game on the Switch as part of the Arcade Archives series. I guess Nintendo still had a ROM of the game sitting around somewhere. Typically, I've considered the Arcade Archive versions of these games to be separate releases, and they won't even be included in the challenge because they are published by Hamster and not Nintendo. However, I made an exception for this one since it was the best way to play the game that I could find at the time. I largely ignored all the extra features included in this version and just focused on the game itself. One final thing of note about this one was that Versus Urban Champion was actually game number 100 when I first played it in the challenge. However, some of the ordering of the games has changed since I'm combining both versions of these games for the sake of the summary videos. That means it is unfortunately losing the honor of being in the video for game number 100. At the time, I thought it was pretty funny for game number 100 to be one of Nintendo's more mediocre titles. So, does this one deserve to be considered one of Nintendo's worst? Let's find out. Like many NES games at the time, this one features two modes. Game Mode A is a versus CPU mode, and Game Mode B is a player versus player mode. For my time with the game, I only focused on Game Mode A, the versus CPU mode. In this one, you play as a guy who's getting into a lot of street fights for some reason. The manual doesn't really provide any sort of story, but I guess the name of the game suggests that you were trying to become the Urban Champion. As I said before, there's a lot of similarities with this one and Game & Watch Punch-Out. Like that game, you can block and punch either above or below. Pressing up and down changes which direction you are blocking in, and you will throw out a punch in whatever direction you are currently blocking. The big change here is that instead of there being a single type of punch, you now have a strong punch and a weak punch. Strong punches push the opponent further back, but they're a little slower and can be more easily blocked. Another new mechanic is that you can move around left to right, although you'll need to actually punch your opponent if you want to move further to the right. While Game & Watch Punch-Out did allow you to push your opponent back, it's been expanded on much more here. Your main objective is to push your opponent all the way to the edge, and doing so will allow you to proceed to the next building. Once you push the opponent all the way back 3 times, they will fall into a manhole and you will beat your opponent. You celebrate your victory while a lady throws out confetti from her window for some reason. Similarly, if you get pushed back 3 times, you will lose the game. What makes this tough though is that your lives never get replenished. Once you've lost 3 matches against any 3 opponents, you will lose and the game is over. Since you will always want to push your opponent to the right, you will generally want to avoid moving backwards. However, occasionally a guy will show up at a window and drop a pot at you, and you'll want to avoid getting hit by it as it will cause you to get stunned and momentarily lose control. What's this guy's deal anyway? I guess he's mad that you guys are brawling outside of his apartment? Additionally, getting hit by the flower pot will also cause you to lose some stamina. Your stamina is this green number on the bottom left, and you gradually lose it throughout the battle. Getting hit also decreases the stamina, and even throwing out punches causes it to go down a bit. I actually never even saw what happens when your stamina runs out, as it refreshes after every round. Apparently, losing all your stamina will cause you to become temporarily winded. There's one final thing to worry about in this game, and that's the police. There's 2 different ways the police will show up. The first of these is randomly throughout the fight. When this happens, the police will just drive by. In order to not seem suspicious, both you and your opponent will move to opposite ends of the screen, essentially resetting the match to even. This can be really frustrating when it happens right before you win, but can also be a lifesaver if you're about to lose. The other time the police show up is when you run out of time. Once the time runs out, the police drive up and arrest whatever player is currently losing. I'm not really sure what the implications of this are. Why aren't they arresting the one who's clearly fighting more aggressively? Anyway, when this happens, you move on like normal and move to the next screen. Your opponent awaits you there as if you just pushed him back, so I'm not sure if he escaped the police or if this is a totally new guy or something. During my first round in the game, I was still trying to learn the controls and figure out what was the best strategy. As a result, I lost my first life almost immediately. After this though, I started to do better, and I pushed it back all 3 times with little trouble. Once I beat him, a little boxing glove appeared in the bottom right corner. Essentially, this game not only keeps track of how many individual screens you've won, but also how many opponents you've beaten. At the start, this is represented by boxing gloves. However, once you reach up to 5 of them, it changes to flags. This pattern repeats over and over again, showing new icons with each 5 you beat. Anyway, I beat my next opponent without any trouble. However, on my next opponent after, I lost another life. He was throwing out a ton of aggressive strong punches, and I got overwhelmed and pushed all the way to the left. While I did manage to beat this guy eventually, I lost pretty quickly to the next opponent after. With that, the game was over after only beating a handful of opponents. At this point, I had no idea what would make for a good goal. The game is once again another endless high score chaser, so I checked speedrun.com for what categories they had. They had the any percent category, which was to beat 3 rounds and beat a single opponent, and they had the flag percent, which was to clear 5 opponents and see the boxing gloves get replaced with flags. I had already cleared the any percent category, but I decided to go for the flag percent too. This next attempt went so much better. It didn't always work, but during this run my main strategy was to just block a punch, then punish with a strong attack. Using this strategy, I got through all 5 boxing glove rounds without losing a single life, and I beat one final opponent to get the flag. I decided to see how much further I could take this run, and things definitely started to get a bit tougher during the flag rounds. Sometimes I wouldn't block fast enough, and occasionally we would even punch each other and both fly back. While this often didn't matter much, it was bad when I was near the leftmost edge. However, after losing 2 lives in the flag section, I made it to the next section after, the trophy section. After this, I got clobbered by the next opponent and my run ended. At this point, I decided I was content with the game since it is ultimately a high score chaser and I had cleared all the speedrun categories. Additionally, I beat the preset high score, although that could be accomplished just by beating a single round, which really isn't that much of an accomplishment. While working on this video, I actually found a few extra points that could make for good goals too. At round 63, you face off against the hardest AI, and after that point, the AI doesn't change anymore. Additionally, after round 138, you finish all the icons and you are simply given the champion title instead. However, you still keep going after this, so it's not like the game actually ends here. Honestly, getting to this point seems brutal, as each attempt will likely take over an hour to even complete. I have seen some call this the winning condition, while others just consider it 100%. I'm not totally sure what I want to do with this one, as high score chasers always are a bit strange to consider what the win conditions are to begin with. I'm personally fine with what I've accomplished for this, but if enough people are interested, I may return to this one to grind it out. For now though, my time with Urban Champion was complete. On to Versus Urban Champion. This one is honestly really similar to the NES title. The biggest change I noticed was that the music was a bit different for some reason. The CPU might have also been a bit tougher too, as it seems like I was losing lives quicker in this one, but it's hard to say for sure. One final change was that since arcade machines often had configurable lives, I was able to set my lives to 6 instead of just 3. My goal once again was to make it to the flag stages. My first run ended up going pretty well. I got to the flag stages without losing a single life, clearing my goal after only a single attempt. I kept going, but suddenly things started to get way more tough. After getting 2 flags, I started to get clobbered by the next guy. I don't know if they make the CPU climb up in difficulty quicker or something, but I ended up losing all of my remaining lives to this guy and ended my run. It turns out the score I received at this point was top of the leaderboard too, so I was pretty content with the game. There's probably something similar in this game with the ranking on the bottom right, although there's so little information on this game that I'm not even sure if that's the case. For now though, my time with Versus Urban Champion was complete. On to the reviews. Well, is this one as bad as they say? I don't personally think I actually hate it as much as most people seem to. This one actually feels notably smoother than Game & Watch Punch-Out, so maybe my opinion ended up being a bit skewed by it being better than an even worse title. Don't get me wrong though, I still don't think it's that great of a game. The core gameplay components do work, but there's just so little substance to this one. While the AI changes a bit after each round, the matches feel so similar, and there's just not enough variety to keep your interest for long. The game is just too simple for its own good, making it become boring pretty quickly. I gave the game a 4 out of 10. Thanks for watching the video. If you want to see more of these in the future, make sure you subscribe to the channel so that you won't miss out on the next one. Also leave a like if you enjoyed it, since it will help the channel grow and motivate me to continue this series. I hope I will see you in the next step of my quest to beat every Nintendo game.